I've decided to make some savory breakfast bowls for breakfast this morning. And so while I'm doing that, I'm also going to make enough extra to last the week because I'm such a big believer in batch cooking and pre-prepping. So this is what I've got going on so far. So I've got a pot with a little bit of water in it ready. And I just took out all the vegetables, well not all, a lot of the vegetables that I had in the refrigerator. I always use a lot of greens for my savory breakfast bowl. So I have a few collard leaves, and then I have a lot of the lacinato kale or the dinosaur kale, as well as I got a bunch of the curly leaf kale as well. And I had a piece of a cabbage left over. In fact, you know, or maybe you don't know, you can just buy a half of a head of cabbage if you don't want a lot of it. Go to the grocery store, just ask the grocer to cut it in half, and they'll be happy to do that for you and just sell you half. I had a little piece of a green pepper left over from something, and then a leek that I had prepped but not used for last night's supper, and a couple of purple sweet potatoes, and they're all going to work just fine. Now what I also have going on here, I wanted to have some eggs as my protein source. So I'm using my Instant Pot, but you could also, just cook them on the stove. But I have a bunch of eggs that I am going to hard boil to go on to my savory breakfast bowls. So I'm going to get started chopping. So I've put some of the sweet potatoes in the pan for today, and I'm going to put some in about half of the jars. And that's because I like to have a little bit of the starch, the carbohydrate that comes from the sweet potatoes. My husband prefers not to have so many carbs, so I'll leave a few without the sweet potato for him. And then I go for the greens. I start with some collard greens. So what I like to do with my collards is a technique called rip and strip, where I just take hold of the stem and rip the leaf right off. Now, the leaves, of course, are the most tender, and so a lot of people only use the leaves, but the stalks are going to have a lot of really good fiber that specifically feeds the good bugs in your gut, your microbiome. So I want to use it as well. So I'm just going to strip all the leaves off. This is just kind of an easy way of prepping collard greens. And then I'm going to take the stems and I'm going to chop them up just really finely. And then I stop when it gets down to the really woody ends. This will compost those. So I'm just going to put all that in today's pot. And then I take those leaves and I roll them up. Kind of like you end up, it looks like a big fat cigar. So just roll them all up like that. And then you can slice it thin. It's called chiffonade, but it's like just slicing it into little ribbons. And that's a really nice way to cook collard greens because they're just a little tougher than the other greens, from the kale, or if you were using chard or any other of the dark leafy greens. Okay, so I'm going to put, I think I'm going to do all the collard greens in breakfast this morning, and then some of the kale as well. So this is the lacinato kale, dinosaur kale, that I've got first here, and so what I'm going to do is just get a bunch of them. Now, you can grip and strip the dinosaur kale as well, just grip and do the same technique as we did on the collard greens. But these stems aren't quite as thick, and so I tend to just chop it all up together. Now, I do get rid of the very end where they're thicker and woodier. Looks like we're good. One more end gone. All right. And then I just kind of bunch up the lacinato kale and start chopping away. All right, so I'm going to add just a little more kale into the pot. So you can see I have a good sized pot, and it's about over halfway full, maybe 2/3 of the way full, with some vegetables and greens. So I'm going to get it started for breakfast here. I put just a little bit of water at the very base of the pot, and now I'm going to turn the heat on. I need to grab a lid. So basically I'm going to steam the vegetables. I'm going to turn it up to about a medium high, and bring it to a simmer, or a nice boil enough that it makes my lid simmer just a bit. And while that is heating up, then I am also going to continue filling up my jars. So very efficient use of time. I'm just going to pack these jars full with the greens. Kind of push it down. So anytime you're storing something in these mason jars, you want to utilize as much space as you can, so there's as little air as possible in there. That's what helps them stay fresh longer. So I kind of pack it down, and so now I'll put a lid on this, put it in the refrigerator and label it, and I can use this tomorrow morning for my breakfast. Just grab it out, have a pot with a little bit of water in it, and just, pour the veggies in, get it steamed up, and then add my fat and protein source. Or I can also use these jars of veggies, not as a savory breakfast bowl necessarily, but just anytime I want to steam or saute some vegetables, I've already got them all prepped. So I'm going to do that for the rest of the jars, keep chopping and filling. Okay, so my pot has come to a boil, it's steaming, my lid is kind of rattling, so I am going to turn it down to just barely on. And I'll let that steam for about 10 minutes or so, and while I finish up the chopping and start to kind of clean up my mess here. Alrighty, so I have put the greens on the plate. I put a couple of hard-boiled eggs. I'm going to top it off with some good healthy fats, because the minerals in the greens are absorbed a lot better if you have some fat with it. So I am putting an avocado, actually a half of an avocado on each plate. Okay, and then I am going to drizzle some nice high quality extra virgin olive oil over the whole thing. Yep, I like to layer my fats. And then add a little salt and pepper. You can add any other spices or seasonings that you would like, any herbs, anything like that. I just like a little good old salt and pepper. And then voila, I have this fabulous Sunday morning breakfast for my husband and I. Doesn't that look good, sweetheart?
Yes.
Hope your breakfast is yummy as well.